Hello, and here we go for episode number 10 of Story Time. So we finished it off where Roz knew that Brightbill was going to come back to the farm at some point soon, but she wasn't entirely sure when and how long she'd have to wait. Chapter 47, The Dinner. Mr. Sharif hopped out of the truck with his arms full of shopping bags. He limped towards the farmhouse, dragging his legs in the usual way. And then he fell. Roz ran over and found the man sprawled on the driveway, groceries scattered all around him. "Are you okay?" she said, pulling him to his feet. "I'm fine," he grumbled. Roz started picking up the groceries and said, "Let me help you inside." A minute later, the two of them were stepping into the house. Jackets and hats hung from pegs on the wall. Shoes were lined up beneath a bench. The man peeled off his boots and hollered, "Kids, it's time to cook some dinner." Footsteps pounded across the ceiling, and the children came flying down the staircase with their dogs. "Is Roz having dinner with us?" said Jaya. "Roz doesn't eat," said Jad. "I know, but she could sit with us." "How about it, Roz?" said Mr. Sharif. "Care to join us for dinner?" The robot stared at the family. The family smiled at the robot. "What would you like me to do?" said Roz. In a very proper voice, Jad said, "I would greatly enjoy the pleasure of your company for dinner." In a very proper voice, Jaya added, "I order you to stay for dinner." The children didn't wait for a response. They snatched the groceries from Roz and scampered off. Oscar ran after them, barking, "Is that food? It smells like food. I want food." The wooden floor creaked as Roz followed Mr. Sharif through the living room. A comfy chair and a sofa faced a dark electronic screen. Above the fireplace hung a painting of a familiar old barn. Doorways led to other rooms. Roz glanced into Mr. Sharif's office and saw a portrait of his family, including his wife. Mrs. Sharif was very pretty, with dark curly hair and a bright smile. It was the same smile Roz saw on the children. "Look, Jaya's crying like a baby," came Jad's giggly voice from the kitchen. When Roz walked in, the girl was chopping an onion with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Roz, I order you to chop this onion for me," she said, wiping her eyes. The robot picked up a knife, and in a flash the onion was perfectly chopped and dumped into a bowl. Clearly, Roz was designed for cutting onions. Roz, I order you to take the night off," Mr. Sharif laughed. "The kids and I want to cook. We enjoy it." More vegetables were chopped. Skittles started sizzling, delicious aromas swirled together, and before long a magnificent meal was set on the table. Oscar positioned himself below to catch food scraps, and everyone else took their seats. Mr. Sharif turned to his daughter. "Would you like to say grace?" The girl lowered her head. "Thank you, God, for this yummy food we're about to gobble down. Amen." Thank you, Jaya," said Mr. Sharif with a wink. "And thank you, Roz, for everything you've done this past year. I had my doubts, but I now can't imagine what we'd do without you." The children looked at each other. Then the family grabbed their knives and forks and dug into their dinner. Because remember, the children know that Roz is going to leave, but Mr. Sharif has no clue. A colourful leafy salad, a plate of sautéed asparagus, creamy mashed potatoes and buttered breads and 2 glasses of milk. The meal was beautiful, but as Roz scanned the table, her eyes kept returning to the roast chicken. It was about the same size of Brightbill. Suddenly, the robot was full of questions. Do chickens live happy lives? Did this chicken know it would be eaten? Were humans bad for eating animals? No, thought Roz. Humans are simply following their instincts, like all creatures, like Roz herself. At least the Sharifs honoured this animal by giving thanks and by turning it into a beautiful, nourishing meal. After he'd finished eating, Mr. Sharif... that's the roast chicken for you. After he'd finished, Mr. Sharif stepped out of the room, and he returned a moment later carrying a violin and a bow. "Growing up, I dreamed of being a musician," he said, thumping back onto his chair. He tuned the instrument, put it under his chin, and started to play. His bow glided back and forth, his fingers danced across the strings, and a lovely old folk song filled the room. Mr. Sharif tapped his foot at the note as the notes rang out, soft and then loud, slow and then fast. The song ended with a flourish, and the music faded to silence. Then he rested his violin on his knees. "This instrument has been in our family for a very long time," he said, "since the day when Cyrus Sharif first built the barn." Cyrus Sharif. Roz knew that name. She unsnapped a pocket on her tool belt and pulled out a small journal. "I discovered this in the old barn," she said, handing it over. The children huddled around their father as he took the journal. They read their ancestor's name on the cover. Then they carefully opened it and turned the brittle pages. "I've never seen this journal before," said Mr. Sharif. "It's a piece of our family history. Kids, look at how they used to milk cows." There they are, looking at it together. Roz left the Sharifs like that, examining the journal, learning about their family history. But what about their family's future? Their lives were difficult. They needed help, and Roz was about to run away forever. As she marched back to the barn that night, the robot felt something like worry and confusion and guilt. Chapter 48. The Return. The robot's feeling of worry and confusion and guilt went away as soon as she heard her son's voice echoing across the farm. "Ma, we're back!" Brightbill's flock appeared above the pasture, flapping and honking and laughing. They glided down to Roz and Brightbill, and Brightbill took his place on his mother's shoulder. "I told you we'd keep your son out of trouble," squawked Loudwing. "Thank you, everyone," the robot spoke in her most cheerful voice. "It is good to see you all again." The cows trotted over, grinning and happily mooing to the geese, whilst the herd and the flock caught up with each other. Roz and Brightbill slipped away to speak privately. "What's the plan, Ma?" said Brightbill. "The plan is simple," said Roz. "Tonight, under the cover of darkness, I will run away from this farm, and then you and I will begin our journey home." Can we fit the next one in? Quickly. Chapter 49. The Goodbyes. That evening was full of sad goodbyes. The first goodbye was between the flock and their young leader. The other geese wanted to help Roz and Brightbill get home, but the journey would be dangerous, and Brightbill refused to put his flock at risk. He demanded they return to the island without him. The geese could feel their instincts urging them onwards, and they knew Roz and Brightbill would look after each other, so they said their goodbyes and took off into the night sky. The next goodbye was between the robot and the cows. Roz marched into the pasture one last time as the herd gathered around. "I guess this is it," said the robot. "Thank you all for being so kind to me." Annabelle sniffed and said, "I really hate goodbyes, but I'm glad you're going home where you belong. I just wish there was some way I could be helpful." "Actually, there is something you can do." Roz unsnapped a pocket of her tool belt and took out the transmitter. "You can hold on to this for me. Hopefully it will take a few days for Mr. Sharif to realise I am gone." Annabelle smiled at the robot gently, as the robot gently took the small device under her collar. Lily and the other calves suddenly swarmed around Roz and nuzzled her legs. They all had tears in their eyes. Tess wanted to lighten the mood, but she couldn't think of anything funny to say. The other cows called out to their friends. "We'll miss you, Roz. Get home safely. Don't forget about us." Roz waved to the herd, then said a silent goodbye to all the farm machines parked in the shed. Then she followed the driveway out to the field with Brightbill on her shoulder and the children at her side. The last goodbye was the hardest of all. Everyone was quiet as they walked through the silvery moonlight, past rows and rows of sprouting crops, and out into the furthest corner of the furthest field. Ros turned and faced Jaya and Jad. She looked past them, back to the distant lights of the farm building. I have prepared the farm for my departure, said Ros. It will take care of itself for a while, but not forever. We can manage things at least until we get another robot, said Jad. This place won't be the same without you, but we'll be okay. What will you tell your father? Said Ros. That's for us to worry about, said Jaya. You just worry about getting home. Ros glanced down at the tool belt strapped across her chest. Would you like this back? No, we would not, said Jad. It was a gift just for you, said Jaya. The girl pulled her brother and her robot into a big, tight hug. Beneath the sounds of the crickets were the sounds of the children crying. How will we know you've made it home? Said Jad. We need to know how your story ends, said Jaya. The robot muttered some animal words to her son and then said to the children, If a goose ever visits the farm and presents you with a feather, you will know that I am home. The children smiled through their tears and waited for their friend to leave. There they are, doing their goodbye hug. But the robot didn't move. More than anything, Ros wanted to go home, and yet she was conflicted. She cared about this family and this farm, and now she was abandoning them. The robot lurched forwards and then backwards again and again as her computer brain struggled with all of these thoughts and feelings. Finally, the children gave her a gentle push she needed. Ros, we order you to run away. And the robot did as she was told. I'm going to leave it there. We're going to have to see, do they get home? Is it an easy journey? See you next time.